What are the best states to form an LLC? Now, why even ask this question? Look, what's the goal here? If you're setting up an LLC, particularly if you're talking about trying to protect an asset, you have certain goals in mind. I'm going to use the example here today about rental property, whether it's a short-term rental like an Airbnb, whether you're talking about long-term rentals like traditional rental real estate. And this can apply to businesses as well. But there's certain goals that you have. Number one, if you're setting up an LLC, you're doing it for asset protection purposes. Think about this. We want to make sure we protect the asset that you are placing in this LLC from potentially either being sued to make you a more unattractive target in terms of going after the asset that's within the LLC, or to at least at a minimum protect your personal assets from being attacked for business activity. Okay, that's the whole purpose here. What is an LLC? You create an LLC, a limited liability company, to separate your ownership from the control of that asset. All right. So in the process of doing that, we want to make sure we have asset protection. But number two, we also want to make sure we have tax efficiency. You don't want the state to come in and take all your profits from you just because you set up your LLC the wrong way. So two main things to consider. So what are we looking for as we look at certain states' laws? Remember, not all LLCs in each state are created equal. Each of them have different distinctions on them. And I'm going to go over what is it we're looking for asset protection. Number one, you're looking for what's known as charging order protection. Charging order protection basically means, let's say you were to set up a California LLC. Best example I can have for this is maybe you bought a property in Joshua Tree or in San Diego or whatever, and now you're looking to move that into an LLC. And the whole goal there is, what happens if the property is in the LLC and you get sued? What if you lose the lawsuit? Well, under California law, that personal injury lawyer could come and seek a judgment against you, and they could get a charging order, which means they could go to the judge and say, Judge, I want you to force the sale of this property in order for me to be able to get access to this equity, and I can take all the value of what's in that LLC to satisfy the judgment. Now, we prefer that not to happen, okay? So charging order protection is to be able to establish an LLC or a strategy for asset protection that allows them, that attacking attorney, the injury lawyer, to not be able to force a sale, even if you lose. I always tell clients of mine that you could lose the lawsuit and still win because the injury lawyer cannot force you to sell the property. Okay, so that's an example. We do not want to be able to be forced to sell in the event of losing the lawsuit in that LLC. So that's one of the first things that we look at here. Okay, now why does that matter? Because here's the thing. If you have a judgment against you, you could be forced to sell that property. And many states provide that the winner of a lawsuit has the ability to force the sale or foreclosure of that asset. And so one of the things we're looking for, you want to see charging order as the exclusive remedy, is what it's going to say in the state LLC law. The other thing you're looking for is single member LLC protection. Now, what do I mean by that? A lot of people will set up a single member as opposed to multi-member LLC. And there are a handful of states that do provide single member LLC protection and charging order protection as part of their actual state law. And so we're going to examine some of those, okay? And it's important because that remedy, you want it to be as an exclusive remedy and does not allow foreclosure or sale of the property, okay? Okay, so now what are the best? I'm going to give you a list of a few of these that are the best for what I just described. They are Wyoming, Delaware, Nevada, Texas, and Alaska. Those state laws for LLCs check the box of what I just said. But now I want to add an additional component. The new component we're going to add to this is also we want privacy. What do we mean by that? Well, think about this for a second. If you are potentially, let's say you own real estate and that real estate is in an LLC. If something bad happens at that property, you're going to have an injury lawyer looking to see who the deep pocket is. They're going to start doing asset searches based upon software and data that they have, online access that they have to determine, what do you own? Do you have other assets? Can we find out who this person is that owns this asset? If we can, we're going to go after them because now we think they're the deep pocket. Okay, so what we want, however, is you want to be a smaller target. If you set up your property or your assets in an LLC, in a state law that provides you privacy, it makes it harder on the injury lawyer and makes you a smaller target in the event of a lawsuit. Okay, now those lists that I gave you, it goes down smaller. You don't have as comprehensive of a list. Essentially, you've got three primary states that we look at. You've got Wyoming, you now have Delaware, and I throw another one in that's not an LLC. It's actually the Arizona Limited Partnership. You can use a limited partnership structure in that situation. Different structure, talk about that later. Okay, now which states check the box for all of these? Both charging order protection, tax efficiency, single member LLC protection, as well as anonymity and privacy. We've identified the three states that we talked about. Now, why do I like Wyoming? Wyoming essentially was the first state to make LLCs a legal business structure back in 1977. It has no state income tax. It's very fairly relatively inexpensive LLC filing fee in order to get everything set up on it. And everything's private. They do not disclose the names of the members. So remember, the biggest thing is a lot of court precedent in Wyoming in terms of being able to establish privacy and charging order protection. Extremely helpful for you there. Okay. Delaware, similar to Wyoming, Delaware has privacy laws in place to protect the members of the LLC from being disclosed to the public, which we want. The cost to file the organization is about $90 for domestic LLCs. If you're in another state trying to use a Delaware LLC, you pay more. You're talking about $200. And you got to pay a state tax fee for there. So it's a little bit, I don't use Delaware as much. The only time we start talking about using Delaware LLCs is if someone thinks they may want to change to a corporate structure at some point. Delaware is the best place to set up a corporation. That's why you end up seeing literally nearly 67% of all Fortune 500 companies are set up as a Delaware corporation. But that's the second point. Now, what about number 3? Now, we love this option because Arizona Limited Partnership provides, it's only a $10 filing fee. There's no annual maintenance. You can remain tax efficient, and it provides a much more comprehensive asset protection component for larger real estate portfolios. And I encourage you to go back and watch some of my other videos. On the YouTube channel, you're going to see me get into more detail about the Arizona Limited Partnership structure. If you have a property, maybe you've got a portfolio of 5+ properties, that's one you want to take a look at because it's going to provide you an opportunity for the diversification of risk. If one property gets sued, the other 4 can actually get out of town. They can actually separate. There's a term known as severance that the limited partner trust, we can use a trust for that. A limited partner can sever from the general partner. So we go into more detail and depth in that in one of my other videos. But essentially, the question comes down to this. What is the best state to form an LLC? I've given you all the pros and cons. I've narrowed it down to 3 states. We've identified those are essentially the best states that check the box on everything. But if we've identified those, why not just pick one of those 3 states and put every asset you have into an LLC in one of those 3 states, right? The problem is it's not that simple. First, you've got to determine where the asset is physically located to determine which state is best for you. One of the best examples for this is what if you own a property in a state with no charging order protection, no privacy, or no single member protection? Good example of this is Florida. You have a lot of people who buy property in Florida, whether it's a short-term rental like an Airbnb, whether it's just rental property, or maybe whatever you have there. It's important to understand Florida does not provide any of those options. Can you just avoid it by dumping your property into an LLC from Wyoming? No. Here's why. There's a term known as home state rules control. In other words, if something bad happens at your Florida property, you cannot go borrow Wyoming's beneficial laws for something happening in Florida. What I mean by that is if you get sued, you're going to be hauled in front of a Florida court, in front of a Florida judge. Florida law is going to be applied to your situation. You can't go borrow Wyoming's beneficial laws. It doesn't work that way. Your Florida judge isn't going to care at all what Wyoming laws say because they're going to apply Florida law. Okay? So as a result of that, you've got to understand your base layer, what your property in Florida, you need to make sure you put that in a Florida LLC. You say, Jeff, I'm confused. Why would I want to do that? I'm 100% convinced I still need to go ahead and put it in a Wyoming LLC. Can I tell you one of the reasons why you want to, number one, I'm going to tell you don't get a whole lot of asset protection doing that. You don't get any extra protection doing that than you do in a Florida LLC, but there's some other negatives as well. Now you're going to have to pay two filings. You're going to have your home state. And what I mean by that is you're going to end up having 2 state filing fees. You're going to end up having two different registered agent fees. You're going to have annual reporting, foreign registered agent, all of these things. You're going to have double the cost of maintenance and setting everything up because it's a foreign LLC. You live in one state, right? Or your property is located in Florida, but yet you're trying to set up something in Wyoming. You're going to have to do 2 different fees. And more importantly, you get no extra asset protection. So why do I bring this up? I want to share with you on my screen very quickly. I want to share with you the solution to this. So I told you already you need to make sure and set it up where you would have your property in an LLC in the state for where the property is located. Here, that's what we did. We set it up in a Florida LLC. Now, the difference would be is this Florida LLC would be a single member that would now be, who's the single member? The single member is this Wyoming LLC that is now going to act as your holding company. Now, why does that matter? Because remember I told you before, you cannot go borrow another state's beneficial laws. However, if you set this up the right way, here's what you can do now. You can now set up a Florida LLC as a single member, and by moving this up into the Wyoming LLC, you now have several things. You now have charging order protection, okay? Now, remember we told you it's extremely important that you set that up with charging order protection so that no one can actually force you to sell that Florida property in that Florida LLC in the event of a lawsuit, okay? And then what else do you have? The next thing you have is privacy. Now, what do we mean by that? What do we mean by privacy? Well, now if I were to bring a lawsuit against your Florida property, your beach house, that Florida LLC right there, I'm going to go to the Florida Secretary of State. When I go to the Florida Secretary of State, they're going to inform me it's actually a single member LLC in Wyoming that I have to go check on. I then go to the Wyoming Secretary of State. What are they going to tell me? Sorry, we have privacy laws here. I cannot disclose the names of the members. I'm now not going to have any idea who I'm suing. I do not know who any of the members are. And now that you have charging order protection, because it's set up through a Wyoming LLC holding company, I can't force you to sell. So there's so many people that I see try to do the exact opposite. They'll come over here and set up a Florida property and dump it into a Wyoming LLC from the beginning. It doesn't work that way. You cannot borrow another state's beneficial laws unless you're using it as a holding company. So I wanted to go over this with you to understand what is the best state to set up your LLC in? Which one should you consider? We gave you a rundown. We talked about the best states for protection, but we also talked about wherever you're buying your property, you cannot go borrow another state's beneficial laws unless you use a holding company in order to obtain that preferential treatment. All right, I hope this was of some assistance to you. Look forward to sharing our next video series with you. I'll see you next time.